The morning light filtered through the crystal spires of Vethara, casting rainbow patterns across the royal palace walls. Queen Thisara stood motionless on her balcony, her forearms hanging limp at her sides. Her once brilliant scales had dulled to a gray color that matched the endless sadness in her large compound eyes. 3 years had passed since Princess Athena disappeared. 3 long years of searching, hoping, and slowly dying inside. The Queen's advisors told her it was time to accept the truth. They spoke in hushed tones about holding a memorial service. They wanted her to declare the princess dead and move on with ruling the empire. But Thisara could not move on. Every mother among her people understood the deep bond between parent and child. For the Zephyrians, losing a child was like losing part of their soul. The Queen felt as if half of her heart had been torn away, leaving a wound that would never heal. The palace gardens below her balcony told the story of her grief. Once they had been the most beautiful in the galaxy. Visitors came from distant worlds just to see the singing flowers and the trees that grew gems instead of fruit. Now the flowers hung their heads in silence. The gem trees stood bare and lifeless. Even the fountain in the center had stopped flowing. "Your Majesty," came a soft voice behind her. Admiral Koresh approached carefully, his own scales showing the blue patterns of deep concern. "The morning briefing is ready." Thisara did not turn around. "What news of the search fleets?" The Admiral's wings drooped. Sector 7 has been completely mapped. No trace of the princess or her ship's crew. The teams in Sector 12 found wreckage, but it belonged to a cargo vessel lost 50 years ago. "And the Outer Rim territories?" "Still searching, my queen, but—" Koresh hesitated. "Speak freely, old friend. The fleet commanders are requesting new orders. Some of their crews have been searching for 2 years without leave. The ships need maintenance. The pilots need rest." Thisara finally turned to face him. Her eyes, once bright as stars, now seemed empty. "Do they think I should stop looking for my daughter?" Koresh looked down at his feet. They think the princess is beyond our help now. She is alive." The Queen's voice was quiet but firm. "I would know if she were dead. A mother knows." The Admiral nodded, though doubt showed clearly on his face. "Of course, Your Majesty." The search continues. After he left, Thisara walked through the empty halls of the palace. Once these corridors had been full of life. Court members had hurried back and forth discussing trade agreements and scientific discoveries. Young nobles had gathered in groups, their laughter echoing off the crystal walls. Now the palace felt like a tomb. She stopped at the door to Zethina's room. The guards bowed deeply as she passed. Inside, everything remained exactly as her daughter had left it. Books lay open on the desk where the princess had been studying alien languages. Her collection of rare stones from distant worlds still sat arranged on the shelves. The bed was made, waiting for someone who might never return. Thisara picked up a small crystal from the nightstand. It was a simple thing, worth almost nothing. But Zythena had found it during their last trip together to the mining colonies. She had been so excited, claiming it looked like a tiny frozen star. The Queen held it up to the light, watching it sparkle. "Where are you, my little star?" she whispered. The disappearance had happened during what should have been a routine mission. Princess Zythena had been leading a diplomatic party to establish trade relations with the colonies in the Outer Rim. She was young for such responsibility, only 30 years old, but she had shown great skill in dealing with other species. The Queen had been proud to give her this chance to prove herself. The last message from the princess's ship had been normal. They were approaching the Kepler asteroid field. A known hazard, but one that experienced pilots could navigate safely. Then, nothing. The ship had simply vanished. The search teams found the diplomatic vessel 3 days later, drifting empty near the edge of the asteroid field. The ship was intact but lifeless. No crew, no passengers, no signs of struggle. It was as if everyone aboard had simply walked into space and disappeared. The investigators had many theories. Pirates were common in that region. Perhaps the crew had been taken for ransom. But no demands ever came. Some suggested the ship had been hit by space raiders who killed everyone aboard and dumped the bodies in space. Others thought it might have been slavers who took the crew to sell in illegal markets. But none of these theories explained why the ship was left behind undamaged. Pirates would have taken valuable cargo. Raiders would have destroyed what they could not steal. Slavers might take people, but they would also take anything worth selling. The mystery drove Thisara to the edge of madness. She sent search fleets to every known pirate base. She hired mercenaries to investigate the slave markets. She even contacted criminal organizations offering vast rewards for any information about her daughter. Nothing worked. Princess Athena had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. The queen's grief affected the entire empire. The Zephyrian people were deeply loyal to their royal family. Seeing their queen suffer made them suffer too. Trade slowed as merchant ships were reassigned to search duties. Scientific expeditions were canceled, so the resources could be used to fund investigation teams. The great expansion that had been planned for the outer territories came to a complete stop. Council meetings became painful affairs. The queen's advisors tried to discuss normal business, but her mind was always elsewhere. She would sit in her crystal throne, staring at nothing, while important decisions were delayed or forgotten entirely. Bills went unsigned. Trade agreements expired without renewal. Other alien governments began to wonder if the Zephyrian Empire was still a reliable partner. Prime Minister Vorthak had suggested very carefully that perhaps the Queen should step down temporarily. Let someone else handle the day-to-day running of the Empire while she grieved. The suggestion had made Thyssera so angry that her scales had flashed bright red for the first time in months. She had dismissed the entire council and locked herself in her chambers for 3 days. Now, as evening approached, the Queen returned to her balcony. The sunset painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, colors that had once filled her with joy. Scythena had loved sunsets. She used to sit with her mother every evening, watching the sky change colors while they talked about the day's events. A servant approached with the Queen's evening meal, but she waved him away. Food had no taste anymore. Sleep brought only nightmares. The only thing that kept her going was the hope that somewhere among the stars her daughter was still alive. "I will find you," she whispered to the darkening sky. "No matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs, I will bring you home." The first stars appeared overhead, cold and distant. Each one represented 1,000 possible places where Princess Athena might be held. The task seemed impossible, but Thyssera had already decided that impossible was not a word she would accept. She would search every star system in the galaxy if necessary. She would spend every coin in the royal treasury. She would sacrifice anything and everything to see her daughter again. Because that is what mothers do. They never give up on their children, no matter how hopeless things seem. The human ship appeared on Vethara's sensors like a small metal dot against the vast backdrop of space. It was tiny compared to the massive Zephyrian vessels that usually visited the crystal world. The traffic controllers almost dismissed it as unimportant until they read the diplomatic codes it was broadcasting. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her ship, the Persistence, and stared out at the beautiful planet growing larger on the view screen. She had seen pictures of Vethara before, but they had not prepared her for the real thing. The entire world seemed to be made of crystal and light. Cities sparkled like jewels across the continents, and rings of orbital stations circled the planet like silver necklaces. "Impressive," said Lieutenant Martinez, her communications officer. "The Zephyrians really know how to build things." Sarah nodded, but her mind was focused on the mission ahead. Earth had been trying to establish trade relations with the Zephyrian Empire for 5 years. The insects were one of the most advanced species in this part of the galaxy, and their technology could help humanity expand further into space. But they were also proud and careful about who they dealt with. This was Earth's first real chance to make a good impression. "Incoming message from Planetary Control," Martinez reported. "They are giving us permission to land at the capital spaceport." "Acknowledged. Take us down, pilot." The Persistence descended through Vethara's atmosphere, passing through layers of clouds that sparkled with ice crystals. Below, the capital city spread out like a work of art. Tall spires twisted up toward the sky, their crystal surfaces catching and reflecting sunlight in rainbow patterns. Gardens and parks were scattered throughout the city, though Sarah noticed that many of them looked brown and withered. The spaceport was enormous, designed to handle ships much larger than her modest vessel. The Persistence looked like a toy among the giant Zephyrian cruisers and cargo ships. But size did not matter to Sarah. She had learned long ago that determination and clever thinking could accomplish more than raw power. A delegation of Zephyrian officials met her at the landing pad. They were an impressive sight, standing nearly 7 feet tall with their 4 arms and iridescent wings. Their compound eyes reflected the light like faceted gems, and their scales shifted color as they moved. Sarah had studied their biology and culture during the long trip from Earth, but seeing them in person was still amazing. "Captain Chen," said the lead official, speaking through a translation device. "I am Ambassador Zindar. Welcome to Vethara." Sarah bowed in the Zephyrian fashion, keeping her head down for exactly 3 seconds. "Thank you for receiving me, Ambassador. I bring greetings from Earth and hope for friendship between our peoples." The formal ceremonies took most of the day. Sarah was given a tour of the city, shown the great libraries and museums, and introduced to various government officials. Everyone was polite, but she could sense a sadness hanging over everything like a dark cloud. The Zephyrians went through the motions of hospitality, but their hearts did not seem to be in it. The audience with Queen Thisara was scheduled for the next morning. Sarah spent the evening in her assigned quarters, studying everything she could about Zephyrian royal protocol. She wanted to make sure she did not accidentally insult the queen by saying or doing the wrong thing. The throne room was the most beautiful place Sarah had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The ceiling opened to the sky, allowing natural sunlight to pour down and create dancing patterns of color everywhere. At the far end of the room sat the crystal throne, carved from a single enormous gem. Queen Thisara looked magnificent even in her sadness. She was larger than the other Zephyrians Sarah had met, and her scales showed she was very old and wise. But there was something broken about her posture. She sat slumped in her throne instead of standing proud. Her wings drooped behind her instead of spread wide. Her eyes, which should have blazed with the fire of leadership, seemed dull and empty. "Your Majesty," Sarah said, bowing even deeper than she had for the ambassador. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Exploration Corps. I bring greetings from my people and hope for friendship between our worlds." The Queen nodded slowly. "Welcome, Captain Chen. Please approach." Sarah walked forward until she stood at the base of the throne steps. Up close, she could see the Queen's grief even more clearly. It reminded her of her own mother after Sarah's father had died in a mining accident. That same lost look, that same sense of a person going through the motions of living without really being alive. "I understand you wish to establish trade relations," the Queen said. Her voice was formal but tired. "Yes, Your Majesty. Earth has much to offer the Zephyrian Empire. Our agricultural techniques could help feed your people. Our mining technology could extract resources from worlds you cannot currently use. In return, we hope to learn from your advanced sciences." The Queen listened to Sarah's prepared speech about trade goods and mutual benefits. She asked the expected questions about Earth's capabilities and intentions, but Sarah could tell her heart was not in the conversation. The Queen was doing her duty, nothing more. Finally, Sarah decided to take a risk. Instead of sticking to the formal diplomatic script, she spoke from her heart. "Your Majesty, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but I can see that you are in great pain. My people have a saying that a burden shared is a burden halved. Perhaps talking about what troubles you might help." The court officials looked shocked. Several of them started to protest that a foreign captain had no right to speak so personally to their queen. But Thisara raised one of her hands for silence. "Your people share their burdens with strangers?" she asked. "Sometimes. When we care about someone suffering, their race does not matter. Pain is pain, no matter what form it takes." The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she began to tell Sarah about Princess Zethina. She spoke about the disappearance, the failed searches, the terrible uncertainty of not knowing what had happened. As she talked, her formal mask slipped away, and Sarah could see the grieving mother underneath the royal exterior. Sarah listened carefully, asking questions that showed she really understood the Queen's pain. She had dealt with missing persons cases during her time in Earth's military. She knew how hard it was for families when someone vanished without a trace. "The investigation teams found no clues?" Sarah asked. "None. The ship was intact but empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no messages. It was as if my daughter and her crew simply disappeared into nothing." "What about the asteroid field where they were found? Any unusual activity in that area?" Admiral Koresh, who had been standing silently beside the throne, stepped forward. "We searched every asteroid, every piece of debris. The field is known to be dangerous, but it shows no signs of recent mining or habitation." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "And the Outer Rim colonies they were visiting? Any of them report suspicious activity around the time of the disappearance?" "We questioned all of them," the Admiral replied. "No one saw anything unusual. Pirates? Sarah asked. Common in that region, but none of the known groups have claimed responsibility. And why leave the ship behind? Pirates would take everything of value. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said something that surprised everyone in the throne room. Your Majesty, with your permission, I would like to help look for your daughter. The court officials began talking all at once. Some laughed at the idea of a human helping where Zephyrian experts had failed. Others worried about the diplomatic implications. But the Queen held up her hand for silence again. You would do this? A human from a world we barely know? Yes, Sarah said simply. Because no parent should have to suffer what you are going through. Because finding lost people is something I am good at. And because sometimes an outside perspective can see things that others miss. Prime Minister Vorthak stepped forward, his scales showing patterns of skepticism. Captain Chen, we appreciate your offer, but our search teams have spent 3 years investigating this matter. What could you possibly accomplish that we have not already tried? Sarah looked him directly in the eye. I do not know yet, but I know that giving up is not an option. Your Queen's daughter is out there somewhere, and she deserves to be found. The Queen stared at Sarah for a long time. Then for the first time in 3 years, a spark of something like hope appeared in her eyes. Very well, Captain Chen. You have my permission to investigate. Admiral Koresh will provide you with all the information we have gathered. As Sarah left the throne room, she could hear the court officials arguing behind her. They thought she was wasting everyone's time. They believed the princess was dead, and the Queen should accept it. But Sarah had seen something in Queen Thisara's eyes that told her the opposite was true. A mother's instinct was not something to dismiss lightly. If the Queen believed her daughter was alive, then Princess Gaithina probably was alive somewhere among the stars. Sarah just had to figure out where. Sarah spent the next 3 days buried in data files and investigation reports. Admiral Koresh had given her access to everything the Zephyrian search teams had collected over 3 years. There were star charts, witness statements, ship manifests, and detailed scans of the asteroid field where Princess Zuthina's ship had been found. The evidence room was enormous, filled with boxes of documents and computer storage devices. Sarah felt overwhelmed at first. The Zephyrians were thorough investigators. They had checked and double-checked everything, following every possible lead. But as Sarah read through the reports, she began to notice something the Zephyrian investigators had missed. They were looking for evidence of death, not signs of life. Every theory they pursued ended with the princess and her crew being killed. They had investigated pirates who might have murdered the diplomatic party. They had searched for wreckage that might contain bodies. They had even checked with morgues on nearby worlds to see if any unidentified Zephyrian remains had been found. Sarah took a different approach. Instead of assuming the worst, she started with the idea that Princess Zathina was still alive somewhere. If she was alive, where would she be? Who would want to keep a Zephyrian princess prisoner instead of killing her? The answer came to her while she was reading a report about pirate activity in the Outer Rim. The report mentioned that several ships had been attacked in the past few years, but instead of being destroyed, they had been found empty and drifting. The crews were always missing, and no bodies were ever recovered. Sarah pulled up the star charts and marked the locations of these attacks. A pattern began to emerge. All the incidents had happened along trade routes that passed near the same cluster of uninhabited star systems. The Zephyrian investigators had noted this pattern, but dismissed it as unimportant because those systems had been thoroughly searched. But what if the searchers had been looking in the wrong places? Sarah requested a meeting with Admiral Koresh. She found him in his office reviewing deployment schedules for the search fleets. He looked tired and his scales showed the gray patterns of long stress. Captain Chen, he said politely, how can I help you? I have been studying the pattern of ship disappearances in the Outer Rim, Sarah said, spreading star charts across his desk. Look at these locations. The Admiral studied the charts. Yes, we noticed this pattern years ago. Those systems were searched completely. Nothing was found. What if you were searching the wrong kind of hiding place? Sarah asked. The Zephyrian search teams would naturally look for bases on planets or large asteroids. But what if the pirates are using something else, such as a mobile base, something that can move from system to system, always staying ahead of search patrols? Koresh considered this idea. Possible, but difficult to accomplish. A base large enough to hold prisoners and hide from sensors would require enormous amounts of power and supplies. Sarah nodded, unless it was not built to hide from sensors. What if it was designed to look like something else entirely? She pulled up another set of files on her portable computer. I have been researching the kinds of ships that pass through this region regularly. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, research ships. Most of them are large enough to hold prisoners, and they all have legitimate reasons to be moving constantly. The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. You think they are using a fake cargo ship? Or a real one that has been modified? Think about it from a criminal's perspective. The best place to hide is in plain sight. A cargo ship traveling normal trade routes would never be stopped and searched unless someone had a specific reason to suspect it. But our patrol ships scan all vessels they encounter. For weapons and contraband, yes. But would they scan for hidden prisoner compartments? Would they board a ship that appeared to be carrying legitimate cargo? Koresh was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he activated his communication system and called up files on registered cargo vessels operating in the Outer Rim. There are hundreds of such ships, he said. It would take months to investigate them all, and most are owned by legitimate businesses that would not appreciate being treated as criminal suspects. Sarah smiled. Then we need to narrow down the list. Who would have the resources to buy and modify a large cargo ship? Who would have contacts in the criminal underworld? Who would know which ships to target for the most valuable prisoners? Over the next several hours, Sarah and the Admiral worked together to create a profile of their suspected criminals. They would need significant financial backing, connections to both legitimate shipping companies and illegal markets, and detailed knowledge of who traveled on which ships. The list of possibilities was still long, but it was manageable. Sarah suggested they start by investigating shipping companies that had reported unusual activity from their competitors. In her experience, criminal organizations often made enemies of honest businesses by undercutting their prices or stealing their customers. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing financial records, Sarah noticed that several shipping companies had complained about a new competitor that somehow managed to offer transportation services at prices far below what should have been profitable. The company was called Stellar Transport Solutions, and their ships seemed to appear and disappear from the Outer Rim trade routes without following normal scheduling patterns. This is suspicious, Sarah told the Admiral. Legitimate shipping companies need to maintain regular schedules to keep their customers happy. They also need to charge enough to cover fuel, maintenance, and crew salaries. A company that charges too little and operates irregularly is either very bad at business or has another source of income. Admiral Koresh ran background checks on Stellar Transport Solutions. The company was registered on a backwater world known for its loose business regulations. The listed owners were names that appeared in no other records anywhere in the galaxy. The ships themselves were purchased with untraceable electronic credits. Classic signs of a front operation, Sarah observed. They probably set up the shipping company to give their ships legal reasons to travel wherever they want. The Admiral contacted traffic control centers throughout the Outer Rim, asking for records of Stellar transport ships. A pattern quickly emerged. The company's vessels always seemed to be in the right place at the right time when other ships disappeared. They would arrive at a system a few days before an incident, then leave shortly afterward. We need to find one of their ships, Sarah said, but we cannot just board it without evidence. If we are wrong, it would cause a diplomatic incident with whatever world they are really registered on. The solution came from studying the company's operational patterns. Sarah noticed that Stellar transport ships always made stops at a space station called Haven's Rest, located in a system that was technically outside any government's jurisdiction. The station was a known meeting place for smugglers and other criminals, but it operated under laws that protected the privacy of its visitors. If we could get aboard Haven's Rest and observe the Stellar transport ships when they dock there, we might be able to gather evidence without violating anyone's legal rights, Sarah suggested. Admiral Koresh shook his head. Too dangerous. Haven's Rest is not a place where Zephyrian military officers would be welcome. Anyone connected to a government would be identified immediately. Sarah grinned. Good thing I am not connected to your government. I am just a human explorer on a private mission. No one at Haven's Rest would see me as a threat. The Admiral looked alarmed. Captain Chen, I cannot allow you to put yourself at risk. If something happened to you, it would damage relations between our peoples. Admiral, with respect, finding Princess Athena is worth some risk. Besides, I have dealt with criminals before. I know how to blend in and how to stay safe. After much discussion, they reached a compromise. Sarah would go to Haven's Rest, but she would not go alone. The Admiral would assign her 2 volunteers from the Zephyrian Intelligence Service, who could pass as independent traders. They would watch the stellar transport ships and try to gather evidence of criminal activity. As Sarah prepared for the mission, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was finally getting close to answers about what had happened to Princess Zythena, but she was also about to enter a dangerous world where one mistake could be fatal. The night before departure, Queen Thisara summoned Sarah to a private audience. They met in the Queen's personal garden, away from the formality of the throne room. In the moonlight, the Queen's scales showed deep blue patterns of hope mixed with fear. "Captain Chen," the Queen said softly, "I want you to know how much your efforts mean to me. For 3 years I have felt helpless. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that, Your Majesty?" "Hope. The belief that my daughter might still be saved." Sarah bowed respectfully. "I will do everything in my power to bring her home to you." The Queen reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small crystal pendant. It was beautiful, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to glow with their own light. "This belonged to Zythena," the Queen said, placing the pendant in Sarah's hands. "It is a traditional gift from mother to daughter among our people. If you find her, please give this to her. Tell her that her mother never stopped believing she would come home." Sarah felt Haven's Rest looked exactly like the kind of place where criminals would feel at home. The space station was old and patched together from dozens of different ship designs. Parts of it were clearly Zephyrian construction, while other sections looked human, Altarian, or from species Sarah did not recognize. The whole structure rotated slowly, creating artificial gravity through centrifugal force. Sarah's ship, now disguised as an independent trader vessel, docked at one of the station's many landing bays. She had spent days preparing for this mission, studying how to dress and act like a smuggler. Her usual neat military uniform was replaced with worn spacer clothing. Her hair was dyed black and cut in a style popular among freelance pilots. Even her posture was different, more casual and slightly suspicious of everyone around her. The 2 Zephyrian intelligence agents who accompanied her were equally well disguised. Agent Vexum had modified his scales to show the faded colors of a trader who had spent too many years in space. Agent Yilra had damaged one of her wings in a way that suggested an old accident, the kind of injury common among pilots who worked dangerous routes. The main concourse of Haven's Rest was crowded with beings from across the galaxy. Humans, Zephyrians, Altarians, and dozens of other species moved through the corridors buying supplies, making deals, or just trying to stay out of trouble. The air was thick with smoke from various alien substances, and the lighting was deliberately dimmed to hide faces and activities. Sarah found a table in a bar overlooking the docking bays and ordered a drink that tasted like liquid metal. From her position, she could see ships coming and going through the massive airlocks. She was looking for vessels bearing the Stellar Transport Solutions logo. She did not have to wait long. On her second day at the station, a large cargo ship with the familiar markings docked at Bay 17. Sarah watched through binoculars as the crew disembarked. They looked like typical spacers, but there was something too organized about their movements. These were not independent traders. They moved like a military unit. "Target acquired," she whispered into her hidden communicator. Bay 17. Agent Vexum was positioned in a cargo loading area where he could observe the ship's activities. Agent Yilra was working as a temporary maintenance technician, giving her access to the station's internal sensors and communication systems. Over the next several hours, Sarah and her team gathered intelligence about the suspicious cargo ship. The vessel was registered as the Honest Prophet, but its crew behaved in ways that suggested their cargo was anything but honest. They refused help from station workers who offered to assist with loading and unloading. They paid for everything in untraceable electronic credits. Most suspicious of all, they purchased supplies that seemed designed for long-term storage of living beings: food concentrates, water recyclers, and atmospheric processors. On the ship's second night at the station, Sarah decided to take a closer look. She waited until the crew went to the entertainment district, then made her way to the docking bay. The ship was still sealed, but she managed to plant several tiny monitoring devices on its hull. If the Honest Prophet was carrying prisoners, the devices would detect signs of life inside the cargo areas. The readings were immediately suspicious. The ship showed life signs in sections that should have been empty cargo holds. The atmospheric readings indicated that someone was maintaining living conditions in areas not designed for crew quarters. "We have got them," Sarah told her team. "Now we need to find out where they are taking their prisoners." The Honest Prophet left Haven's Rest the next morning, but Sarah was ready. Her own ship followed at a safe distance, using passive sensors to track the cargo vessel's course. The Zephyrian agents had managed to plant a small beacon on the target ship, making it easier to follow without being detected. The chase led them to a system that did not appear on any official star charts. It was just a red dwarf star with a few rocky planets, the kind of place that explorers would mark as nothing of interest and move on. But as they got closer, Sarah's sensors detected something that made her heart race. Hidden among the asteroids orbiting the system's outermost planet was a facility that had been carved out of a large asteroid. It was camouflaged to look like natural rock from the outside, but energy readings showed it was very much alive with activity inside. "This is it," Sarah breathed. "This is where they have been taking the prisoners." The facility was larger than she had expected. According to her scans, it had multiple levels and could probably hold hundreds of beings. There were docking bays for ships, power generators, life support systems, and what looked like holding areas designed specifically for keeping prisoners. But getting inside would not be easy. The asteroid base was heavily defended with automated weapons and sensor networks. A direct assault would be suicide, and even if Sarah could somehow fight her way in, the defenders might kill their prisoners rather than let them be rescued. She needed a different approach, something that would get her inside without raising alarms. The answer came from studying the base's operational patterns. Every few days, ships would arrive carrying supplies or new prisoners. The ships were always scanned and cleared before being allowed to dock. But Sarah noticed that the scans were focused on detecting weapons and identifying ship types. They were not designed to detect individuals hiding inside cargo containers. "I am going to smuggle myself aboard one of their supply ships," Sarah told her team. Agent Vexum looked alarmed. "Captain Chen, that is extremely dangerous. If you are discovered, we will have no way to help you. I know the risks, but this might be our only chance to get inside and find Princess Xythena." Sarah spent the next day preparing for infiltration. She studied the supply ship's cargo manifest and identified a container that would be loaded into the asteroid base's storage areas. Using tools from her ship's workshop, she modified the container to create a hidden compartment large enough for one person. The supply ship was called the Lucky Strike, and its crew had the same organized behavior Sarah had noticed on other ships connected to the criminal operation. They were professionals, not random smugglers. Someone with significant resources was running this operation. Sarah hid inside her modified cargo container as the Lucky Strike approached the asteroid base. Through a tiny camera she had installed, she could see the automated defenses scanning the ship. Her heart pounded as energy beams swept over the container, but her modifications held. The scanners detected nothing unusual. The ship docked with a solid thunk, and Sarah felt the artificial gravity shift as she was transferred from the ship's environment to the base's systems. Mechanical arms moved her container into a storage area, and she waited until the sounds of activity died down before carefully cutting her way out. The inside of the asteroid base was like a nightmare made real. The corridors were carved roughly from rock and lit with harsh artificial lights. Sarah could hear sounds echoing from deeper in the facility, voices speaking in various alien languages, the hum of machinery and something that might have been crying. She moved carefully through the base, using her military training to avoid security cameras and patrol routes. The facility was organized into different sections. One area seemed to be crew quarters for the guards and staff. Another held what looked like administrative offices, but it was the third section that made Sarah's blood run cold. The prison area was a maze of cells and holding pens designed for different types of alien physiology. Sarah saw beings from dozens of species, all looking thin and hopeless. Some were clearly recent captures, still showing signs of fight and defiance. Others had the broken look of people who had been prisoners for a long time. She found Princess Xythena in a cell designed specifically for Zephyrians. The princess was alive, but she looked nothing like the proud young royal Sarah had seen in photographs. Her wings were damaged, her scales had lost their luster, and her eyes showed the haunted expression of someone who had suffered terribly. "Princess," Sarah whispered through the bars. I am here to rescue you." Scythena looked up slowly as if she could not quite believe what she was seeing. Who are you?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I am a friend of your mother's. Queen Thyssera sent me to find you." At the mention of her mother, the princess's eyes filled with tears. "Mother? She is still looking for me? She never stopped believing you were alive," Sarah said, pulling out the crystal pendant the queen had given her. "She wanted me to give you this." Princess Scythena reached through the bars with trembling hands to touch the pendant. I thought she must have given up by now. It has been so long." 3 years, Sarah confirmed. "But we are going to get you out of here. All of you." Sarah quickly explained her plan. She had brought enough explosives to disable the base's main power systems and security networks. In the confusion that followed, the prisoners would be able to escape to the ships in the docking bays. But they would have to move fast before the guards could organize a counterattack. "Can you help coordinate the other prisoners?" Sarah asked. "Many of them have been here longer than you. They will know the guard routines and the layout of the facility." Princess Scythena nodded, and for the first time since Sarah, the news of Princess Scythena's rescue spread across Vethara faster than light itself. Queen Thyssera had been in her private chambers when Admiral Koresh burst in with the message from Sarah. For a moment, the queen could not speak. She had hoped for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to receive good news. "She is alive?" the queen whispered, her 4 hands pressed against her chest. "Alive and coming home, Your Majesty. Captain Chen found her and over 200 other prisoners. They are all free." The queen's scales flashed through every color of joy and relief. She collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept locked away for 3 years. "When will they arrive?" "The rescue ships will reach Vethara in 18 hours. Those 18 hours felt like 18 years to Queen Thyssera. She paced through the palace halls, unable to sit still or focus on anything except the approaching reunion. The palace staff had never seen her so energetic. For the first time in 3 years, the queen was truly alive again. The royal gardens began to bloom as if they could sense their caretaker's change in mood. Flowers that had been closed and dying suddenly opened their petals. The fountain in the center courtyard started flowing again, though no one had turned it on. Even the gem trees began sprouting new crystalline leaves. News of the rescue spread beyond the palace to the cities, and then to the farthest colonies of the Zephyrian Empire. Citizens gathered in public squares to watch news broadcasts and celebrate the return of their beloved princess. Many had given up hope years ago, but now they remembered why they loved their royal family so much. The rescue ships appeared on the edge of the star system right on schedule. Queen Thyssera stood on the highest balcony of the palace, watching the sky even though the ships were still too far away to see with the naked eye. Admiral Koresh stood beside her with a pair of high-powered binoculars. "I can see them," he reported. 5 ships, all broadcasting Zephyrian identification codes. "The lead ship is requesting permission to land directly at the palace." "Granted," the queen said immediately. "Clear the main landing pad. I want no delays." The royal landing pad had been designed for state ceremonies and diplomatic visits. It was made of polished crystal that reflected the sky like a mirror. As the rescue ships descended through the atmosphere, thousands of Zephyrians gathered around the palace to witness the historic moment. Sarah's ship was the first to land. Through the viewports, she could see Queen Thyssera waiting at the bottom of the landing ramp, surrounded by palace guards and government officials. But the queen only had eyes for the second ship, which carried her daughter. Princess Scythena's ship touched down with barely a whisper of engine noise. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the landing ramp lowered and a figure appeared in the doorway. The princess looked different from the young royal who had left on a diplomatic mission 3 years ago. She was thinner, and her wings showed signs of damage that would probably never fully heal. But she was alive and she was home. Queen Thyssera ran up the landing ramp, her royal dignity forgotten in the rush of maternal joy. Mother and daughter embraced with all 4 arms, holding each other as if they would never let go again. Both were crying, their scales shifting through patterns of pure happiness. "My little star," the queen whispered, using the pet name she had called Scythena as a child. "I knew you would come back to me. I never stopped believing you would find me," the princess replied. "Even in the darkest moments, I knew you were looking." The reunion was beautiful, but it was also heartbreaking. As the queen held her daughter, she could feel how much weight the princess had lost. She could see the scars on her wings and the haunted look in her eyes that spoke of terrible experiences. But Princess Zethina was strong. The royal bloodline that had ruled the Zephyrian Empire for thousands of years was not easily broken. As she stood with her mother on the crystal landing pad, she began to look more like the confident young diplomat she had once been. "Mother," she said, pulling back to look the Queen in the eye. "There is someone you need to meet, someone who gave me back my life." Princess Zethina led her mother to where Sarah was standing quietly beside her ship. The human captain had changed back into her clean military uniform, but she still looked tired from the rescue mission. "Captain Sarah Chen," the princess announced formally. "The bravest person I have ever met." Queen Thesara approached Sarah slowly. The queen was much larger than the human, and her presence was overwhelming. But when she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Captain Chen, how can I possibly thank you for what you have done?" Sarah bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, seeing your family reunited is thanks enough. But there is something else you should know." Princess Zethina was not the only one who needed rescuing. There were over 200 prisoners in that facility, beings from dozens of different worlds. Your daughter helped coordinate their escape. She showed true leadership when it mattered most. The Queen looked at her daughter with new pride. "Is this true?" Princess Zethina nodded. "We were all prisoners together. We became a family of sorts. I could not escape and leave them behind." "Then you have learned something that cannot be taught in any palace," the Queen said. "You have learned that true royalty is not about titles or crowns. It is about taking care of those who need protection." Over the following days, the story of the rescue became clearer. The criminal organization that had kidnapped Princess Zethina was part of a galaxy-wide slave trading network. They specialized in capturing valuable prisoners who could be sold to wealthy collectors who wanted exotic servants or gladiators. The asteroid base had been just one of many such facilities scattered across the galaxy. But Sarah's rescue had done more than free the prisoners. It had exposed the entire network to law enforcement agencies across dozens of star systems. Within weeks, authorities were raiding other bases and arresting the criminals responsible. Princess Zethina threw herself into the effort to shut down the slave trade. She worked with investigators to identify other facilities and helped track down the organization's leaders. Her experience as a prisoner gave her insights that no one else could provide. The princess also began working with the other rescued prisoners to help them return to their home worlds. Many had been captives for years and needed medical treatment and counseling. Some had families who thought they were dead. Others had lost everything and needed help rebuilding their lives. Sarah stayed on Vethara for several weeks, helping with the investigation and getting to know the royal family better. She found that Princess Zethina had a sharp mind and a genuine desire to help others. The experience of being a prisoner had not broken her spirit. Instead, it had taught her to value freedom and to understand the suffering of others. Queen Thesara was equally impressive. Now that her daughter was home, the Queen threw herself back into ruling the empire with renewed energy. But she ruled differently than before. The grief and uncertainty of the past 3 years had taught her to be more compassionate and to understand that even queens could face problems they could not solve alone. On Sarah's last day on Vethara, Queen Thesara held a special ceremony in the throne room. Sarah was expecting a simple goodbye, but instead she found herself facing the entire royal court and government. "Captain Sarah Chen," the Queen announced, "you came to our world as a stranger seeking trade agreements, but you leave as something far more valuable. You leave as family." The Queen held up a crystal pendant similar to the one she had given Sarah to return to her daughter, but this one was different, carved with patterns that marked it as a royal family heirloom. "By the ancient laws of our people, I adopt you as an honorary daughter of the House of Thesara. You will always have a home here, and your children and their children will be welcomed as royalty." Sarah was speechless. She had expected gratitude, perhaps a medal or a trade agreement for Earth. She had not expected to be adopted into an alien royal family. "Your Majesty, I am honored, but I do not deserve such recognition. I was just doing what anyone would do." Princess Zethina stepped forward. "That is exactly why you deserve it. You saw someone in pain and decided to help, even though we were strangers from a distant world. You risked your life for people you had never met. That is not what just anyone would do. That is what family does." As Sarah prepared to leave Vethara, she looked back at the Crystal Palace one last time. The royal gardens were in full bloom now, more beautiful than they had ever been. The queen and princess stood together on the balcony, waving goodbye to their new human daughter. But Sarah's impact on the Zephyrian Empire went far beyond the rescue of one princess. The investigation into the slave trade had revealed weaknesses in the Empire's intelligence networks and border security. The government began adopting human methods of investigation, combining logical analysis with intuitive thinking. More importantly, the rescue had shown the Zephyrian people that their traditional approach of overwhelming force was not always the best solution. Sometimes, a single person with determination and clever thinking could accomplish what entire fleets could not. The alliance between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire became stronger than anyone had imagined possible. But it was built on more than trade agreements and mutual defense treaties.